Hey everybody, welcome to our little listening and wine corner here with James, and Grace is going to fire off a few questions and I'm going to try and answer them the best to my ability.
Awesome. So James, tell us about your love of the Rolling Stones.
Oh man, well I think it starts with my love for music. I was brought up in a house where music was always in the background and lots of influences. My parents were into country and blues and rock and roll. My mom was a big Elvis fan, so music was always in my life. And having an older brother, 5 years older, I think he was a big influence on me, and his love for the Rolling Stones kind of turned me onto it in my teenage years, and it's just kind of gone from there. It's something he and I both share, very passionate about.
How has your love of the Rolling Stones inspired James Cole as a brand?
Great question. I think, for me, the Stones are just a classic rock and roll band. My opinion, the greatest rock and roll band in the world. But it's not that they're the perfect rock and roll band, but they're the most authentic rock and roll band I think there is out there. I've been to many shows over the years, and mistakes are made in the show, but it's wildly authentic. It's a rock and roll experience, and I think with James Cole, we try and emulate that. We're not perfect, but we want, when people come here and try our wines, to see that it is an authentic experience. It's something we're really passionate about, and it's something like we pour our heart into, and we're influenced by many things as well in the making of our wine. So I think we share that for sure.
So we've all seen the Rolling Stones guitar. Can you tell us about how it came to be at James Cole?
It's probably a better question for Colleen, but it was around 2007. We were at a local charity auction, and I think, to be honest, I probably got caught up in the moment. One of the final live auction items was this wonderful Rolling Stones guitar that we probably couldn't afford, but I couldn't pass up. So there's a crate. I gotta find the photographs. There was a journalist there capturing the night, and he contacted me several months later, and he actually sent me 3 photos of the moment. And the first is me at the table, kind of raising my paddle, and Colleen's next to me, and she's talking to the person next to her, so she's not even aware. The second photo has me standing for joy, holding up the paddle. And Colleen kind of turning to realize what's going on with this shocked look on her face while everyone's cheering behind us. Of course, me getting the winning bid at that point. And then the third photo is them handing me the guitar and me pretending I'm jamming it, and Colleen's hands just sinking into her face, sinking into her hands as she realized what I had just done. But hey, I think it's a good investment. It's got Bill Wyman's signature on there, which is a rare one. He quit the band in the early 90s, I think it was. So I've always said to her, it's a great investment. And I think thousands of people have probably come to the winery now and seen it. So I think it was worth it.
Very cool. So how many times have you seen the Stones in concert?
I think at last count, it was about 11. My very first time I can tell you about, which was one of my favorites. Actually, they've all been amazing, but my 2 favorites are probably my first and my most recent, the last one. First one was 1989, have the t-shirt here, Steel Wheels, Los Angeles Coliseum with Guns N' Roses and Living Colour. And it was October 18th, 1921st, and we actually saw the middle show, the 19th in 1989. 2 of my buddies and I had worked all summer and earned enough money and probably our parents' trust to leave the country of Canada and fly down to Los Angeles and on our own and take in the Rolling Stones. Well, 2 things I didn't realize that night is how much I was truly going to fall in love with this band. It was the Steel Wheels tour was the kickoff of the great rock and roll show, where they had all the inflatables and the cannons and the fireworks, and never seen anything like it. I don't think anyone had, because typically rock shows in stadiums before that were just bands coming out and playing, but it was truly a rock spectacle. And it's obviously set me off on my journey in love for the Rolling Stones. But the other thing I didn't realize that night is my wife was living on the USC campus at that same time. So even though I didn't meet her that evening, not when you're 20 years old and in a foreign country, knowing that you're probably just a moonlight mile down the road from what turns out to be your future wife is a pretty cool story. The last one, the Stones 60 tour, had the chance to go back down to Los Angeles, this time taking my wife and 2 children to the Rose Bowl to witness, what I think my kids realized was one of the last great rock and roll shows. 60,000 people on their feet, playing for 3 hours. My teenage kids probably having that same experience I did the first time. I remember my son saying, I could feel it in my chest, when the guitars and the riffs were playing. And I said, yeah, that's an experience that I'm not sure your generation will see again. I think there'll be amazing music shows, but I don't know if they'll continue to be rock and roll shows of that nature. So I was glad to experience with them. They appreciated it, and we had a wonderful night.
Amazing. What can you tell us about the tour jackets?
Oh man, that was something that we stumbled upon just recently in the last year or two. My wife and I were actually driving down the California coast. By happenstance, pulled into an antique shop in the Central Coast. Our love for vintage everything, we're always on the hunt for cool stuff. And tucked in the very back of this obscure antique shop, there was a bunch of different vendors, and kind of glanced and had to do a double take and saw these 2 jackets hanging there. So I inquired with the lady who was managing the entire store, and turns out they're authentic tour jackets from '69 U.S. tour and the '72 World Tour. Contacted the owner who wasn't there, and was able to work out what I think was a pretty sweet deal. So I haven't put those up in the winery yet. I'm still trying to think of the perfect place. I've got my eye on a '82 World Tour jacket as well. Don't tell my wife. I might make a bid on it on eBay, but yeah, I think they would be fun to hang in there too. I love the history of rock and roll and Americana. So those 2 say it all.
Very cool. So we just recently released our 2020 Cabernet.
Oh yeah.
If you were to give us a pairing of which Rolling Stone album do you think would pair best with this?
Wow. If I had to say one, I'm probably going to go with Sticky Fingers, one of my favorite albums. Stone's first album of the 1970s, not long after I was born, and it's one I go back to and just listen from start to finish. It's a beautiful, beautiful album. I think you see all their influences rolled up in one. I mean, this band was, inspired by rhythm and blues, American rhythm and blues, jazz music, Charlie Watts' love for jazz. You've got honky-tonk country, Mick and Keith, and this, it's all wrapped up there in so many layers. It's just a classic album, start to finish. So when I think of our cab and what we try and make, it's got to be filled with lots of layers. It's got to have so much going on, but at the end of the day, it's a classic Cabernet. So I think those 2 make a beautiful pairing from start to finish.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much. That's all the questions that I have for you today. But if there's anything else that you wanted to tell us about, talk to us about, we're all ears.
That's a good question. Yeah, I think just going back to the Stones and their influence on us, they're timeless. And I think of, when Colleen and I set out to make cab on this property and share it with a few people, we wanted to be able to stand the test of time. We wanted, that first moment you experience it, and now here we are 20 years later, and hopefully you feel the same way. And, that's certainly how I feel about this band and their music. It stands the test of time, and it has that level of consistency and authenticity that we strive for. So hopefully you feel the same way. Cheers.